Hey guys, it's Mrs. Brewer, and yesterday when we were reading The Lightning Thief, Percy and Annabeth and Grover made it to the underworld. So today we're ready to pick up on chapter 19, which is called We Find Out the Truth. Well, sort of. Let's go ahead and let's read. Imagine the largest concert crowd you'd ever seen. A football field packed with 1 million fans. Now, imagine a field 1 million times that big, packed with people. And imagine the electricity's gone out and there's no noise, no light, no beach ball bouncing around over the crowd. Something tragic has just happened backstage. Whispering masses of people are just milling around in the shadows, waiting for a concert that will never start. If you can picture that, you have a pretty good idea of what the fields of asphodel look like. The black grass had been trampled by eons of dead feet. A warm, moist wind blew like a breath of a swamp. Black trees, Grover told me they were called poplars, grew in clumps here and there. The cavern ceiling was so high above us, it might have been a bank of storm clouds, except for the stalactites, which glowed faint gray and looked wickedly pointed. I tried not to imagine they'd fall on us at any moment, but dotted around the field were several that had fallen and impaled themselves in the black grass. I guess the dead didn't have to worry about little hazards, like, being speared by stalactites the size of a booster rocket. Annabeth, Grover, and I tried to blend in with the crowd, keeping an eye out for security ghouls. I couldn't help but looking for familiar faces among the spirits of the dead in Asphodel, but the dead are hard to look at. Their faces shimmer. They all look slightly angry or confused. They'll come up to you and speak, but their voices sound like chatter, like bats twittering. Once they realize that you can't understand them, they frown and move away. The dead aren't sad or scary. They're just sad. We crept along, following the line of new arrivals that snaked from the main gates towards a black-tinted pavilion with a banner that read, "Judgments for Elysium and Eternal Damnation. Welcome, newly deceased." Out the back of the tent came 2 much smaller lines. To the left, spirits flanked by security ghouls were marched down a rocky path towards the field of punishment, which glowed and smoked in the distance, a vast cracked wasteland with rivers of lava and minefields and miles of barbed wire separating the different torture areas. Even from far away, I could see people being chased by hounds, burned at the stake, forced to run naked through cactus patches. Oh, that'd be really awful. Or listen to opera music. Also awful. I could just make out a tiny hill with an ant-sized figure of Sisyphus struggling to move his boulder to the top. And I saw worse tortures too. Things I don't even want to describe. The line coming from the right side of the Judgment Pavilion was much better. This one led down to a small valley surrounded by walls. A gated community, which seemed to be the only happy part of the underworld. Beyond the security gate were neighborhoods of beautiful houses from every time period in history. Roman villas and medieval castles and Victorian mansions. Silver and gold flowers bloomed on the lawn. The grass rippled in rainbow colors. I could hear laughter and smell barbecue cooking. Elysium. In the middle of that valley was a glittering blue lake with 3 small islands, just like a vacation resort in the Bahamas. The Isle of the Blessed, for people who had chosen to be reborn 3 times and 3 times achieved Elysium. Immediately, I knew that's where I wanted to go when I died. "That's what it's all about," Annabeth said, like she was reading my thoughts. "That's the place for heroes." But I thought of how few people there were in Elysium, or how tiny it was compared to the fields of asphodel, or even the fields of punishment. So few people did good in their lives. It was depressing. We left the Judgment Pavilion and moved deeper into the asphodel fields. It got darker. The colors faded from our clothes. The crowds of chattering spirits began to thin. After a few miles of walking, we began to hear a familiar screech in the distance. Looming on the horizon was a palace of glittering black obsidian. Above the parapets swirled 3 dark bat-like creatures. The Furies. I got the feeling they were waiting for us. I suppose it's too late to turn back, Grover said wistfully. We'll be okay. I tried to sound confident. Maybe we should search some other places first, Grover said. Like Elysium, for instance. Come on, goat boy. Annabeth grabbed his arm. Grover yelled, "Ah!" His sneakers sprouted wings and his legs shot forward, pulling him away from Annabeth. He landed flat on his back in the grass. Grover, Annabeth chided, stop messing around. But I didn't. He yelped again. Ah! His shoes were flapping like crazy now. They levitated off the ground and started dragging him away from us. Maya! He yelled, but the words seemed to have no effect. Maya already! 911! Help! I got over being stunned and made a grab for Grover's hand, but it was too late. He was picking up speed, skidding downhill like a bobsled. We ran after him. Annabeth shouted, untie the shoes! It was a smart idea, but I guess it's not easy when your shoes are pulling you along feet first at full speed. Grover tried to sit up, but he couldn't get close to the laces. We kept after him, trying to keep him in sight as he zipped between the legs of spirits who chattered at him in annoyance. I was sure Grover was going to barrel straight through the gates of Hades' palace, but then his shoes veered sharply to the right and dragged him off in the opposite direction. The slope got steeper. Grover picked up speed. Annabeth and I had to sprint to keep up. The cavern walls narrowed in on either side, and I realized that we entered some kind of tunnel. No black grass or trees now, just rock underfoot and the dim light of the stalactites above. Grover! I yelled, my voice echoing. Hold on to something! What? He yelled back. He was grabbing at gravel, but there was nothing big enough to slow him down. The tunnel got darker and colder. The hairs on my arms bristled. It smelled evil down here. It made me think of things that I shouldn't know about, like blood spilled on the ground, the foul breath of a murderer. And that's when I saw what was ahead of us. I stopped, dead in my tracks. The tunnel widened into a dark cavern, and in the middle was a chasm the size of a city block. Grover was sliding straight down towards the edge. Come on, Percy! Annabeth yelled, tugging at my wrist. But that's... I know! She shouted. The place you described in your dream. Grover's gonna fall if we don't catch him. She was right, of course. Grover's predicament got me moving again. He was yelling, clawing at the ground, but the winged shoes kept dragging him towards the pit, and it didn't look like we could possibly get to him in time. What saved him were his hooves. The flying sneakers had always been a loose fit on him, and finally, Grover hit a big rock and the left shoe came flying off. It sped into the darkness, down into the chasm. The right shoe kept tugging him along, but not as fast. Grover was able to slow himself down by grabbing onto the big rock and using it like an anchor. He was 10 feet from the edge of the pit when we caught him and hauled him back up the slope. The other winged shoe tugged itself off, circled around us angrily, and kicked our heads in protest before flying into the chasm to join its twin. We all collapsed, exhausted, on the obsidian gravel. My limbs felt like lead. Even my backpack seemed heavier, like somebody had filled it with rocks. Grover was scratched up pretty bad. His hands were bleeding. His eyes had gone slit-peopled, goat style. the way they did whenever he was terrified. I don't know how. I didn't. Wait, I said, listen. I heard something. A deep whisper in the darkness. Another few seconds, and Annabeth said, Percy, this place. Shh. The sound was getting louder. Muttering. An evil voice from far, far below us. Coming up from the pit. Grover sat up. Well, what's that noise? Annabeth heard it too. I could see it in her eyes. Tartarus. The entrance to Tartarus. I uncapped Anaclesmos. The bronze sword expanded, gleaming in the darkness, and the evil voice seemed to falter, just for a moment before resuming its chant. I could almost make out words now, ancient words, older than even Greek, as if... Magic, I said. We have to get out of here, Annabeth said. Together, we dragged Grover to his hooves and started back up the tunnel. My legs wouldn't move fast enough. My backpack weighed me down. The voice got louder and angrier behind us, and we broke into a run. Not a moment too soon. A cold blast of wind was pulling at our backs, as if the entire pit were inhaling. For a terrifying moment, I lost ground, my feet slipping in the gravel. If we'd been any closer to the edge, I would have been sucked in. We kept struggling forward, finally reached the top of the tunnel, where the cavern widened out into the fields of asphodel. The wind died. The wail of outrage echoed from deep in the tunnel. Something was not happy that we'd gotten away. What was that? Grover panted when we collapsed into the relative safety of a black poplar grove. One of Hades' pets? Annabeth and I looked at each other. I could tell she was nursing an idea. Probably the same one she'd gotten during the taxi ride to LA, but she was way too scared to share. That was enough to terrify me. I capped my sword, put the pen back in my pocket. Let's keep going. I looked at Grover. Can you walk? He swallowed. Yeah, sure. I never liked those shoes anyway. He tried to sound brave about it, but he was trembling as bad as Annabeth and I were. Whatever was in that pit was nobody's pet. It was unspeakably old and powerful. Even Echidna hadn't given me that feeling. I was almost relieved to turn my back on the tunnel and head towards the Palace of Hades. Almost. All right, we'll stop there for today, and tomorrow we'll find out what happens when he gets to the Palace of Hades. I'll see you tomorrow.